All right, everyone. It's now 3 o'clock, so I think we are ready to get started. The last couple of people might be joining us as well. I can see we're 28 now, so well on the way. My name's Jonas. I'm going to be presenting to you today. So I'm just going to share my screen with you so we can have a look at the topic for today. Great, so you should now all be able to see my screen. So as I said, my name's Jonas, and I'm going to be presenting this mini course for you here today. Today is all about what we call a practical co-design workshop planning toolkit. And this session here will be just around an hour. And what I want to share with you is really our approach at NILE at how we go about planning co-design workshops. So quite a practical session that we're going to be looking at today. And I'm interested in sharing my toolkit with the community as well. So to start off, see here, just get everything working. As I said, my name's Jonas. I'm a senior service designer based in Edinburgh, working for a company called NILE. And I am a pretty hands-on practitioner, leading large-scale projects within service innovation and insight, and working across a large number of sectors. And kind of what we're going to be taking a look at today is a toolkit that I've helped develop as part of my experience of running and planning workshops over time. So what we're going to be presenting is NILE's toolkit. We are a strategic design company. We're based in Edinburgh, but we work across the UK and also the US. And a core part of our offer is within service design and service innovation. And what I'm interested in sharing with you today, there's a couple of things. The main focus is on NILE's co-design planning toolkit, which there is an image of there. And I want to share my learnings from kind of how we build it, why we build it that way, kind of what are the things that we've improved and how we've been using it. And the way I'm going to structure this is around 45-minute presentation, kind of talking you guys through how to use it, the different learnings from it. And then at the end of the session, a bit of a Q&A session where there's an opportunity for you guys to ask any kind of follow-up questions after the session. And we're going to be using a tool called Fun Retro for that, that I'll introduce at the end of the session. But if you do have any questions while going through, then just write them down and we'll post them there at the end of the session. So just to get started, before kind of focusing solely on our toolkit, many of you are probably going to be service design practitioners or design practitioners or research practitioners, and I'll kind of know co-design quite well. But I think just for those that are either new to service design or new to co-design workshops, I think it's kind of useful to just do a quick refresh on kind of what are they and why do you do them. So kind of if we're talking about kind of what is co-design, kind of in a nutshell, is kind of it's the activity of making users, access, and stakeholders part of the design process. And it's all about kind of bringing in one session together the right knowledge, perspectives, and design skill set to be able to quickly create something. And that's kind of the why behind it. Is like co-design is really good at rapid creation because you've got the skills to create something and the right people to validate if that is a good idea in the same place. And it's also great for getting buy-in from different actors and stakeholders as well. So today, we're not going to focus on kind of everything about co-design. It's quite a focused session. So what we will focus on today is a bit of kind of establishing why is workshop planning important, and also kind of talk you guys through how to create, document, and share kind of what I call a workshop recipe. There's lots of other things that you could have focused on as well that we're not going to focus on in this session. We're not going to focus specifically on co-design methods, the different activities you do within the session, how to build your workshop, the design and the structure of it. We're not going to focus on facilitation and not specifically around remote workshops. But that's not to say that you can't use the toolkit for remote workshops as well, but that's not specifically the focus for today. So we're really going to zoom in on planning in this session, and I want it to be quite a practical session about enabling you to be able to use the toolkit after the session. So to start out, I think it's kind of worth going, instead of going directly to the solution, going directly to the toolkit, of understanding a bit about the problem we wanted to solve first, of kind of how this came about, and kind of what situation led us to actually developing this, and kind of letting you understand kind of why I think there's a need for this. And there's probably going to be different solutions to it. And those of you that kind of plan and run co-design workshops yourself probably have your own way of doing things. So I think it'd be interesting to have a discussion about that at the end as well. So first of all, the success of a co-design workshop isn't just down to a charismatic, inclusive facilitator. It's not just about showing up on the day and nailing facilitation. That is definitely part of it, but it's at least as important to design, plan, and coordinate the workshop beforehand. And there's several reasons for that. Depending on how you run your co-design workshops, I would say typically what we do is kind of our typical co-design workshop with, let's say, customers and stakeholders in the same room. You're looking at 3 to 4 different groups, each with a facilitator in them. So that means that you need to get some sort of consistency across the groups. It's not just about one person being able to nail the session and have everything in their head. There's a lot about kind of designing and planning and coordinating to be able to get a consistent result out of it. So first of all, I'd like to touch on kind of what we used to do and kind of why we had a need for a new solution here. So going back just over a year ago, actually, it feels like a long time ago though, what we used to do was a long written document, kind of a workshop plan is what we would call it. Very similar to what we would do for UX testing. So similar to a discussion guide, and that's kind of where the format originally came from, of let's take this format into running a workshop instead and use it in a similar way. But together with that, running a physical workshop, we also had a lot of tools and templates we wanted to print out and use in the session as well. So that also meant that we had folders with files in different versions all together. So basically, it wasn't a great solution for the problem it was trying to solve. We ended up spending a lot of time and effort on documentation that you probably didn't need to. It was often hard to digest for stakeholders. They might feel a bit overwhelmed with the amount of documentation there. And also the workshop plan and templates, they felt a bit disconnected. If you're reading one document, you need to find the name of the right document, opening and look at it as well. And also all of this meant that it was really hard for both ourselves and our team to reuse the different methods, approaches, and templates. So, well, they were kind of buried away kind of on our server somewhere, and you needed to find them, and there wasn't really one place to go for them. So there's definitely kind of room for a new solution. But what we needed to actually push us over kind of going ahead and kind of creating a new solution was kind of the circumstances to push that ahead. So we know we needed a new solution. So what happened was just over a year ago, I need to go on holiday. I'd booked it well in advance, and all of a sudden, a fast-paced project I was on had a workshop week planned in the week I was going on holiday, but I was still going to do the work of actually planning the workshop, enabling others to run it. So what I needed was a bit of a tool to help me overplan the workshop, so enabling others to run it. So it meant that we need to step away from what we were doing before, and there was a bit of kind of, could there be another solution to this problem than long documents and folders with templates in them. So basically, to put it that way, kind of we needed a new workshop recipe template of saying, what are the different steps you're going through? What are your ingredients? How are you going to kind of facilitate this session as well? And needed to be something that was really quick to take in for people, thinking about the different people that was going to consume it, thinking about my colleagues that were going to be running the session, thinking about stakeholders that need to be briefed on it, thinking about all the templates and tools that need to be used. So kind of looking at it, we looked at it as a bit of thinking of a workshop as a service. So really thinking about it, kind of a workshop in itself is, there's both a kind of before, during, after stage of the workshop. There's the planning, there's actually running the workshop, and there's the kind of debrief and analysis after it as well. But actually thinking about it, there's a lot of similarities with designing a service. There's multiple actors involved. There are those that are planning the session. There are different channels that you use to communicate. There's different touch points, with this plan being one of them, and there's co-created value within it as well. So we asked ourselves kind of, what do we want from such a workshop recipe? What should it be doing? So we set out some criteria for that. So first of all, the basic things we wanted to do was the obvious of, I wanted to save time and effort. So create something that you can collaboratively be planning on, and you can also enable delegation to others that are planning with you. Other than that, it's really important to have a single view of everything, so not have the workshop plan in one place and templates in another. For project stakeholders that are often busy, it was really important to avoid information overload, so actually give them a chance to be able to get their head into how this workshop was going to be running, and also sign off on the scope of it. Number 4, delivering consistent outcomes. So key thing here is about, we tend to be running a workshop in several different groups, and that means that each facilitator has their own view on how to run it, but still we need to get some consistency across the groups to deliver consistent outcomes. So it should also be able to do that. And finally, we wanted it to enable reuse of the activities and tools we were using as well. So making it easier for our whole team to be able to find activities that are tried and tested. So I want to take a look at our co-design working planning toolkit. And what I want to start off with is a bit of a guided tour of it. I'm just going to see if I can get into Miro in a moment. So first of all, we chose to go away from long written documents and folders, and we'd already adopted Miro as our platform for both running remote workshops and also kind of working remotely as well. So it kind of came natural that that was the tool we chose to go ahead with kind of trialing this out in. And it's still the tool that we're using for it. It's not to say that you can't use other similar solutions as well. There are things like Mural, for example, that does a similar thing, but kind of we're using Miro for most things. So kind of that's why it's living in here. And that's also the template I'm going to share with you guys at the end of the session as well. So let's just have a look at how that looks in Miro. Just one second. So you should now be able to see my Miro board here. And what I want to do is I just want to quickly talk you through really the key things here about how we've set this up, why we've set it up this way, and then I'm going to zoom in on some of the details in a moment. So this is an actual plan that I have been using with a client. I've taken out client names, and you can see there's some yellow bars out over some of it as well, just for confidentiality within this. So it won't have our client name and won't have specific details within it. But overall, what we're looking to create, if we kind of look at it here, is kind of a workshop one-pager. So again, thinking about not overloading people with information, but giving them enough information to be able to kind of know how to run the session or feel confident that this is delivering the right outcomes. So what we do is kind of, there's two sections to it. There is introduction and logistics at the top, and then there's the workshop plan below. First of all, just want to cover really quickly on the top bit here of saying, at this example here, we have 2 different workshops, the location and the time for it, when people should be arriving beforehand. We have our overall objectives and outcomes, as well as roles and responsibilities of the day. So who are the facilitators going to be, who is going to be attending the session, for example, from an internal team or from client side, and who are the workshop participants that we have recruited as well, and what are the criteria for those. So really a quick snapshot of some of the logistics to the session. What we've also done that I haven't included here is a lot of our clients might not have done co-design before, might not know it that well. So a good idea for what to do here as well is kind of do a co-design one-to-one. We've got a kind of a one-pager in a deck kind of explaining what is co-design, why do you do it. So for those that are new to it as well, it's giving them a chance to get their head around what is co-design. So below the introduction and logistics is the workshop plan itself, so the key part of the document. And this is really a timeline of the workshop itself. So it has the different activities that we'll be running at the top. It has the timing of the workshops. In this example here, we have 2 workshops, a morning one and an evening one. So you can see the timings of that. And also it is including arrival and introduction and kind of setting up the session, as well as kind of what happens after the session as well. So it's really kind of a full picture of how it works on that side. And below each of the sections, we have kind of sub-objectives. So thinking about for each of these stages, what is it we want to get out of it, and why is it we're doing this activity? And then below that are kind of the detailed activities that is created so that facilitators can run the session consistently, and also give an overview for any observers or any stakeholders attending the session as well of how is this going to work. For each of the sections, there is a templates and material section. So I'm going to zoom into a couple of different bits of it in a moment, but really what it does is it connects the activities that you're doing with the templates that you'll be using, so you don't have that gap that we had previously. And also it gives you the opportunity to say, for example, when you're creating the plan, not just the finished plan itself, to track progress as well. So it gives you one view of what activities have I created, what templates do I need, what parts of it are done, what parts are not done yet. So it's really good for collaboration and delegation as well in that sense. So that's kind of really the strong bit around moving this into something like Miro, for example, as well as if you're using any video within the session as well. If that's online, you have the links for it. So it's really giving you kind of everything in one place for that matter. Right. Then what we've done here is, this is in a print-friendly format, something that can actually be printed as an A3 and is actually readable still, which is mainly for some project sponsors and project stakeholders that are new to Miro, doesn't want to use it. So it's kind of giving them the option to do things their way, of where you can do an export of a PDF and send that over, and they can either zoom in on it or they can print it out and read it as well as you can share it directly from Miro. One of the things that we've added below here is kind of an overview of all the tools and templates that we're going to be using in the session. So this is kind of naming all of the documents and kind of calling out how many copies are you going to be needing of each one. So it's also giving us a bit of a packing list if we're traveling to an external venue, which is what we do most of the time. And then kind of giving the opportunity to say, what other things will I be needing? So thinking about kind of post-it notes, pens, things like that you will be using at the session as well. And usually we'd be adding kind of a photo of the venue as well. If we're traveling to it and we don't have a long time to set up the venue, it's always useful to know kind of what are you walking into on the day as well. And that is really the high-level overview of the toolkit itself. I will be sharing a version that doesn't have any templates in it at the moment, and I'll be doing that at the end of this session as well. So going back to the presentation, let's zoom in on some of the details of it. So one of the things that's really important with the toolkit, and what I think is working really well with it, is this single view of everything. Is you can get the overview of it. You don't need to go into all the detail, but for some people it's really useful. So I was talking about that example there where I needed to plan a workshop and other people needed to run it. So an example of what I did there was a bit of over planning, in the sense of we were traveling to venues and setting up in a really short space of time. So things like we had foam boards sent to the venues, and we needed to set up our templates really quickly. So this is really kind of showing what goes on the different boards in the session, what goes on the wall. So you can go into that level of detail as well. But it's also things like we're talking about kind of packing lists, for example. So the on the Mira board, we had kind of this board below of actually saying how many of each do you need, and you can track your progress when getting ready to the workshop as well as enabling you to track kind of what has been done and what needs to be done as well. So for the project team running the workshop, it's a really useful tool to align on what you're doing and get set up. Secondly, it's about giving project stakeholders just enough details. So we're talking about, we had kind of the problem with the way we were previously planning workshops of it could feel a bit overwhelming. And that could mean a couple of things. I mean, it goes back to knowing your stakeholders and who you need to brief on how the workshop is going to be running, as well of what level of detail do they need and what are they comfortable with. If you have a really trusting relationship with them, they might only need the overall objectives and they're happy to rely on you to create the best possible workshops. You might have others that are kind of needing more details, wanting more details, or often people that are less experienced in running workshops, or generally kind of with the role that they're in, that kind of feel the comfort of having a lot of detail and contributing to shaping the session as well. So it's really about kind of striking the right balance between having the right amount of content. I think compared to what we had before of those kind of 20-page documents kind of outlining all the activities that we'd be going through, a one-pager seems much more digestible. It has different layers to it, and it's not necessarily that someone needs the full amount of detail to know what we'll be doing and feel comfortable about the outcomes of the session as well. Finally, I want to talk a bit about enabling reuse of activities. So what's really powerful when you use this over time is you start to build up a library of the methods that are tried and tested over time and enabling reuse. So for a consultancy like us, for example, it's really helpful to be able to speed things up, of saying, what have we been using before? You can get an overview of all of your icebreakers together, all of your ideation methods together, and you know who have been running these, kind of any kind of iteration on them as well. It's really about having everything in one place. So having that kind of central place where you can gather all your boards in one place. So kind of zooming out from just the single session and thinking about how do we become better in general at running workshops, and how do we increase our capability over time to do this as well. So finally, I think there's a couple of things to remember and kind of take away from this session here. So first of all, I'll make the toolkit available to you guys and I'll show you where to get that in a moment. But really kind of, there's a mindset of thinking about a workshop as a service. So think about it as you as a workshop planner or workshop facilitator are part of delivering a service both to your client and facilitating that from, for example, customers as well. And think about, it isn't necessarily that what I'm presenting to you here today solves all of your problems. It is one single touch point that helps you do a very specific job at this point. But there's a good thing about getting in that mindset of thinking about a workshop as a service. Secondly, there's very fine balance between over and under planning. You can easily, with something like this, go into too much detail. It comes back to a couple of things of how much detail you need to go into when planning a session. First of all, if it's something like, I need to go on holiday and I need to make the plan and hand it off to someone else, I would naturally always over plan it to feel confident that the right thing is delivered. But depending on the experience of the facilitators that will be running these, they might not need all the detail to run a consistent session. And I think that's actually down to the last one there of workshop planning is kind of only the enabler of great facilitation. And even though you plan things out to very fine detail, people will still have a personal style. I was actually lucky enough to, it's not very often I do it, observe how some of my colleagues, I think 3 of my colleagues were running a session. So we had a situation where basically we had a group of participants that didn't show up for a workshop, meaning that we had less groups in the session that we planned, which meant that I had the luxury of floating between groups. And even though we had quite a well-structured plan, it was interesting to see how different people approach it. So I think it's one thing having a plan and kind of following a plan as well, but there needs to be room for personal facilitation as well and having a personal style when facilitating. I skipped on the third one there of finding out what stakeholders and facilitators actually need, but they're a bit connected of kind of what you need to do before starting to plan this is get a sense of how much detail do I need to go into? What is the right level that someone needs to get the outcome that they're looking for? Now, some stakeholders that could, for example, be a project sponsor or both internal or external that's interested in the right thing being delivered, might not want a full plan like this. They might want the first couple of points of it, but not zooming into great detail with the template. So that's also kind of the reasoning behind structuring it that way of saying, the further you go down, the more detail you go into. So I think those are really the key things to remember and take away from the toolkit. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I want to share this with the community as well. So I'll give you the link to where to download it in a moment. But really what I'm interested in, and the reason why we're interested in sharing this as well, is first of all, enable others to run great workshops. But secondly, I think there's a great value in others being able to try it out and change it and share it back again. So I think the way to think about where our toolkit is at the moment is thinking about, we're probably at version 1.0. So I think we have all the basic ingredients there. There's nothing that fancy about it right now. You can do all kinds of things in Miro. There's so many plugins and things you can do. We've really kept it quite simple at the moment, but there's definitely way more advanced things that you can do to go way beyond what we've built at the moment. So I'm opening that up to for all of you to create a copy of the board, and I'll be linking to that in the comments as well to a Medium post going over the same things that we've covered in the session here today, and a link to download that as well. I'm just going to ping that over to you guys in the comments. If I can exit this. There you go. So you'll find the link within the article, and I'm just going to show you where that is. So this is the Medium article, and let me see if I can find the link within it. Here we go. So that will bring you to a public My report, and fingers crossed it's actually working. I'll try pressing it. Seems to be working. So it's similar to the version that I've shown to you guys before, only that it doesn't have all the templates within there. So it's really up to you to build that out yourself. But other than that, it has the basic formatting there. So it's up to you to kind of take our logo away, kind of build it your own way. You'll have kind of your own way of adding to this, and kind of for your specific criteria as well. So that's where you can find the toolkit. But I'm interested in, if any of you guys are interested in building any further on it, then let me know as well. I'm happy to give some input on that as well. But it's something that we're kind of evolving over time as we learn more and more things we need for it to do for us as well. So just going back to the presentation here, we're pretty good on time, so we actually have plenty of time for questions. So what I want to do is, I want to do a bit of a 2-minute task using a tool called Fun Retro, which is a tool I'll show you in a moment. I'll just share a link for it in a moment as well. I can just quit my presentation.